It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It's Tuesday, September 12th, 2023, and it is time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 281 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am Maction. I am one of your hosts. I am joined by my co-host, my better half in podcasting, Mr. Lomgaluka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425. And for the next hour, we're going to cover topics ranging from history all the way to lawsuits as they relate to our favorite hobby, which is video gaming. But before that, Mr. Nice Guy, we weren't able to get together last week, so it's been a couple of weeks since we've chatted. Anything new going on?
No, man, life is always good. I always say that. I'm an optimist. Last week couldn't do the show. Been doing a good amount of gaming. I don't know if we talked about the camping trip I took with the family over Labor Day weekend.
No, tell me more.
Yeah, so we went up to Green Bay. We've started this tradition of going up there Labor Day weekend. Went up with a couple different families who also have kids. And we went up to this park called Bay Beach. It's an amusement park up there. Had a good time with the family. Super cheap amusement park. Every ticket is 25 cents, Mac. And to give you some perspective, the roller coaster is like 4 tickets. So $1 to ride the roller coaster, right? So it was just a ton of fun. New ride opened up there, so that was great. Camped out. Spent some time at the literal beach up there. And did some retro game shopping. And shout out to, I'm going to find the name of the store before the end of the episode. Oh, shoot, I'm going to find it. But I want to give a shout out to this store, Mac, because I've been looking for a couple different retro games for a while. Vice Project Doom, as you know, we saw it in Portland, and the guy tried to charge me $70 for it, and I said absolutely not. So I've been looking for that game for NES, and then also Journey to Silius, and I found both of them. And I don't really have time to tell the whole story right now, but suffice it to say they had both of them in the back at this game store. And they went and found them, and they sold them to me. So it was a good weekend.
Man, that's amazing. I don't have anything to compare to that. I think the wildest and craziest thing that happened was last week on Tuesday. We were, feeling up for the show. You had a long day, lots of stuff going on, and I had been in a car accident. So, it was, it was one of those days where, an episode just wasn't meant to be. But lest anybody get concerned, I will say it was just sort of fender bender thing. No biggie. I was fine. Everybody was fine. And basically nothing happened. But it was one of those where, something like that happens and it kind of throws your whole day off, even if it's nothing serious. So when you were like, Mac, I don't know if I can do the show today, I was like, oh, thank goodness. I didn't want to be the lame person and be like, oh, I've been in a car accident. Let's not do a podcast today.
And that's what I would have said. I would have mocked you in that exact tone. I would have been like, oh, a car accident. Oh, I can't talk now. I can't talk into a microphone. No, I'm just kidding, dude. I'm glad that you're okay and that no one was hurt. That's really all that matters. So
yeah. And it is all good, but that's the craziest, most exciting thing that's happened my week. Nothing to compare to Vice Project Doom and Journey to Silius. Those are some awesome finds,
They're
dude.
Awesome finds.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, and I found a few other games lately. I won't get into all that now. Dude, hit up an open mic yesterday that I haven't hit up in a while, so that was fun. And I've got to say, I'm going to take a hard stance. I'm not the comedian who gets offended by jokes. I will say I don't think 9/11 jokes are funny, though. I get that it's been 20 years. I still think that they're not funny. And sue me. If you disagree, sue me. And it's not a too soon thing. It's just I think it's borderline hacky. I'm not going to mince words here. So I did my jokes. working on this bit, Mac, about how Captain America may have been a terrible person back in the 1920s. You never know, right? And it's a really good bit. Like, I'm excited to perfect it. The 9/11 stuff to me is something we could do without, fellow comics who I know all across the country are listening to this video game podcast. Skip the 9/11 jokes on 9/11 and on other days. But Mac, other than that, life is great, man. Had fun last night telling some jokes and found some retro games. So things are good.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Well, Mr. Nice Guy, I say with no further ado, we do what we do best and get right into that gaming news. What do you say about that?
Let's get all up in that gaming news because there's a lot of it today for episode 281 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Mac, we're going to start with a story that is not the one you think we're going to start with. But it's big news because today there was an Apple event, and Apple introduced the iPhone 15 Pro. Every year they introduce a new one, and you know what they do, Mac? They have a great naming convention. They just go up by one number every year. This story is on IGN.com by Logan Plant. He writes, Apple says its iPhone 15 Pro represents, quote, the next generation of mobile gaming with support for console and PC games previously unavailable on mobile hardware. Revealed at today's Apple Wonderlust event, the iPhone 15 Pro is getting a lineup of AAA games, Mac, including native versions of Resident Evil 4 Remake, Resident Evil Village, Death Stranding, and Assassin's Creed Mirage. Apple also teased huge performance upgrades and ray tracing for gaming on the iPhone. This represents a huge milestone for mobile gaming as Assassin's Creed Mirage's release on iPhone 15 will mark the first time that a console/PC Assassin's Creed game will run natively on iOS. Mac, this is a big deal to me. I think it's a big deal for the industry. And I think it's a big deal for people who hate Apple. Because at this point, if you can play a AAA game on an iPhone and it has ray tracing, a AAA game, Mac, why would you ever buy an Android? I don't know that you would. And I'm not even going to give you a chance to answer the question because I know you don't have a good answer. So I'm not going to put you in the spot and make you answer that. But, Mac, I'm excited to know that if your phone broke tomorrow, that you would be joining us on the Apple side. Let's move on. I'm just kidding, Mac. What do you want to say about that?
Oh, no, that sounds fantastic. I think that's terrific, and I am happy for anybody who wants to play games on their phone. Great news. Resident Evil 4 Remake, good game. I want more people to play it and play it on your phone. Heck yeah. I will say that I feel like one of the things we learned, and I know, Mr. Nice Guy, that we talked about it when Nerd Next Door was on the show, and we also talked some more about it the immediately following episode. The statistics about who plays games and how people play games.
Yeah.
That mobile gaming is such a huge component of video gaming in this day and age, and one that gets left by the wayside. I'm delighted that some AAA titles are making their way onto mobile devices, and I think this is a rising tide lifts all boats types things where we're going to have some push from the Google crowd, and I was about to say Windows Phone, but I don't know if they're really pushing for that. But there may be some more push to get experiences like that on more platforms, on mobile platforms, and maybe some people taking mobile gaming more seriously in the future. I think this is great news. I'm probably not going to join you in the Apple crew, but I can still see this as an absolute win for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's one of those things where I'm console agnostic, I'm platform agnostic. When Xbox wins, when PlayStation wins, when Nintendo wins, gamers win, right? When these new things come out, this new hardware, software, like, it's good for all of us. And hopefully it could open up the world to more people playing, because there's going to be people who buy the iPhone 15 that are not traditional gamers, but now have access to these AAA titles, and maybe it makes them dip their toe in the water. I think this is great news. I will not be upgrading. I don't upgrade that often. Hashtag baller on a budget. And I'm kind of practical when it comes to that. Like, before my iPhone 12, I think I was rocking an iPhone 6 with a cracked screen. So I don't upgrade that often. But this is cool news. When I do upgrade, I'll be able to play AAA games. Mac, there are so many news stories today. I say we keep things moving. This next one is a big one, and it's about Unity, the platform Unity, and the engine Unity, I should say. And this is also on IGN.com, also by Logan Plant. Here's what he wrote. Game developers aren't happy with a new policy from Unity that will cost developers a small fee every time someone downloads a game built on Unity's game engine. It's called the Unity Runtime Fee, and the new pricing model will apply to developers who reach a certain amount of installs and revenue. Quote, we are introducing a Unity runtime fee that is based upon each time a qualifying game is downloaded by an end user, Unity's announcement read in part. It continues to say, we chose this because each time a game is downloaded, the Unity runtime is also installed. Also, we believe that an initial install-based fee will allow creators to keep the ongoing financial gains from player engagement, unlike a revenue share. The Unity runtime fee is scheduled to take effect on January 1st, 2024, and it's been universally panned by developers on social media since its announcement earlier today. Mac, I know that you were aware of this story. What are your thoughts on this? A fee being charged to the developers every time a gamer downloads the game.
So, if I recall properly, the number that they put out there was something like $200,000 or something like that. Because previously, the idea with Unity had been you don't pay anything until you break a certain
threshold
revenue on your game. And then after that, you pay a fee to...
I apologize because that's super important. So here's the numbers. They'll have to pay Unity 20 cents per install once their game passes 200,000 in revenue over the last 12 months and 200,000 life-to-date installs.
So there are a lot of people for whom that will not impact, but there are going to be a lot of people for whom it does. Whenever a change like this comes in, I always sort of wonder how. You know what I mean? Technologically, how you do that. If I get a thing, I've got the computer, I've got my PC, I've got my Steam Deck. Those are the only two places that I tend to download games that might be built on the Unity engine. And if I download, it sounds like if I download once onto my PC and another onto my Steam Deck, then that fee's hitting them twice. Additionally, I don't know if that's going to be a concern. Like, how exactly are they measuring that? Presumably, the numbers have to be shared with them, or are they starting to input code into Unity that sends them a heads up, oh, hey, guess what? Somebody just downloaded a game built on your thing. In which case I could see, I don't know, if somebody has an axe to grind against EA and just sets basically a sort of listener file that just keeps pinging that server over
Ridiculous,
and over
Mac.
again.
Don't
and
you
saying,
do it.
Hey,
Don't
I'm
you do
downloading EA games repeatedly. Let's bankrupt them real fast.
Don't give people that idea, Mac.
You're right. I should probably not have spoken it into the universe, but I'm sure I'm not the first and I won't be the last person to think about it. But those are the types of things that I wonder when something like this happens. What's to stop that? And Ishmobile, who's with us live, does bring up a question of, is it only effective on the newest version of Unity, or is it retroactive to earlier ones?
Good question.
And I don't know if that's something that's been mentioned.
I don't know. And that's I had the same thought, because how do you grandfather someone into this? Or rather, do you grandfather game companies that weren't a part of this new agreement prior to January 2024 and say, hey, this didn't apply to you, but going forward, this is how it's going to be. If you want to use our engine, it's complicated.
Now it's Maction's time to shine. Having read a few terms of service agreements,
Okay.
I can tell you that most of them say something like, hey, we can change this at any time and, we can give you notice, or maybe even not give you notice. Tee-hee.
It says tee-hee in the terms of service.
There are some weird terms of service out there and some lawyers. I mean, let's not get started on lawyers. They're a superstitious, cowardly lot.
Well, to give people some perspective, Like, you're probably thinking, well, what games are made with Unity? Like, I only play games made on the Unreal Engine. Well, here's a few, because I just Googled it. Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout, that's a free-to-play game, still pretty popular. Among Us, we've all heard of that. Untitled Goose Game. Monument Valley 2. Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Cuphead, pretty popular game. Pokemon Go, free-to-play. Beat Saber. Genshin Impact. And others, Mac. There's a lot. And so it almost makes me wonder, for games that are on Game Pass, would that apply, or is it strictly for games that are being downloaded on PC, where you also have to download the Unity engine?
Ooh.
That's what I would imagine.
Another good question. Does game data that is being streamed even count in that? Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that that's probably something that they've thought about and written in there, but it lends itself to a lot of questions. Questions that we don't have answers for.
It sure does. There's two more kind of big things I'd like to discuss. We're going to start with the one that's super important, Mac, and then we'll see if we have time for the other. This is on PCGamer.com by Jeremy Laird. Now, first of all, shout out to Steam, Mac, because if anyone's logged into Steam today, they know that today is the 20th anniversary of Steam, which is a big deal. Go collect those free stickers, those free little trinkets that they're giving out. I love Valve. I can't speak for Mac. I think he loves Valve as well. But the other thing, and I'm excited to hear from the chat about this too, is that there's a new mystery Valve hardware device that's been certified in South Korea. I think this is a big deal. This is on PCGamer.com by Jeremy Laird. A new Valve hardware device has just received radio certification in South Korea, which is often a precursor to a wider release. But what exactly is it? The obvious candidates are a new Steam Deck, a controller, or a VR headset. Given what Valve has said regarding the Steam Deck 2, a new model or even a significant update doesn't feel imminent, so we'll rule that out. A new controller is a bit more plausible. However, Valve discontinued the Steam controller back in 2019, and the broad sense is that it, along with the whole Steam machine thing, was rolled into the Steam Deck. So a new controller seems unlikely, though not entirely possible, which leaves us with a new VR headset. Mac, I'm not going to read this whole article, but for those in the chat, I'm curious, and for you, Mac, what do you think this new hardware could be? What would you like it to be? If Steam is putting out new hardware, and I know that we're both big fans of the work they do, Valve, I should say, what are you looking for?
The one that I would like to see is I would like to see a new Valve Index. Not that the old one wasn't great and still isn't great, but yeah, I'd love to see a new one because I feel like that would maybe drive the price of the previous Index a little bit lower and maybe a bit more into my price range.
Yeah, I will say I know the Valve Index is great. I don't use it nearly as much as I used to. I still love it, and I still pop it on maybe a couple times a month. I would like a new Steam controller. I never got, and so does Ishmael. We'll read his comment in a minute. I never purchased the old one just because I was being dumb. I remember at one point it was down to $5, and I was like, I would never use that. Now I wish I had one. And with streaming of games, and with Steam Decks taking Bluetooth controllers, I just think it would be cool to have access to a new Steam controller, and I think it would do very well. So Ishmael says, honestly, a new Steam controller with parity with the Steam Deck. Dude, he said exactly what I was thinking. But a layout closer to the original Steam controller. So I think that'd be good. I don't think we need a new Steam Deck yet, but I think a Steam controller would be cool. Mac, favorite Steam memory while we're talking about 20 years of Steam? Anything, or like, not favorite, but a Steam memory, like maybe a game you got as a discount that you love, maybe your first experience with Steam. Like, what's a positive Steam memory that you'd like to share?
I remember Left 4 Dead 1 had basically a builder mode that you could basically build your own Left 4 Dead 1 campaigns, modify existing ones, add assets. You could just build a whole thing. And so I spent a lot of time learning how to use that, work that. And so I have this particularly positive memory of trying to build a Left 4 Dead campaign in that. And while it wasn't the first game I got on Steam, it was definitely in the early in the early days there, and a lot of fond memories. Never really had anything to show for it at the end, but sometimes the journey is itself the reward rather than the destination.
That's right. I agree. For me, I've got to point to this bad boy, my Steam Deck. And by the way, I actually plan on customizing it pretty soon. I want to get a purple black backplate for my Steam Deck. I'm excited to do that. But this thing has changed the way that I game, and I'm constantly telling people it's the coolest piece of tech that I own, that I've ever owned. I can connect it to my PlayStation 5. In fact, I can play it remotely. I can do Xbox Cloud streaming. I can play retro games. I can play Steam games. I can stream from my PC. It just makes it easier when I have 15 spare minutes to get in without having to go down to the TV, turn on my plate. It's amazing. There's so much it does. And yes, people have complaints about it. It's not perfect. I love what Valve has done with it, and it's so modifiable. I love it. Mac, we don't have time to fully discuss another news story, but I want to give a PSA to the people at Microsoft. This is not a news story, but something that happened this weekend. I hopped on to play a game via Xbox Cloud streaming, and for the first time, I experienced wait times that were, in my mind, unacceptable. And I saw a message that said a lot of people are playing right now. The wait is 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 70 minutes, depending on what time I tried to play. Now, if cloud streaming is the way of the future, this has to be fixed. I've never had that issue with Netflix. I've never had that issue with my live TV that is streaming. A lot of gamers I saw were tweeting about this after I had experienced it. And this isn't a news story. This is just a PSA. Either keep it physical hardware or get the streaming stuff in order. Get the bandwidth that you need. We're giving you enough money. That's my PSA, and that has been our news for the week.
Well, now we turn from what's going on right now to a look into the past with some video game history. Of course, Mr. Nice Guy, 2003, Steam, but you beautifully covered that earlier. A couple of games, 1996 release for the PlayStation 1, Crash Bandicoot. Shout out to my lovely spouse, for whom that is the favorite game. 1998, also PlayStation 1, Mega Man Legends. An interesting attempt to move Mega Man into 3D. Not exactly my favorite, but still worthwhile. And then in 1995, going farther back, for the Super Nintendo, Mega Man 7. Yes, those of you who are here for the live show, you can see that my backdrop is thoroughly Mega Man themed. So when this stuff comes around, I have to commemorate it. But Mega Man 7, Mr. Nice Guy, I've got some things to say about this one, but is that one that you played on the Super Nintendo?
Mega Man 7 is absolutely not, man. So I played the originals on NES, and then I loved Mega Man X and still love Mega Man X. Never got to Mega Man 7. Tell me more about it.
So Mega Man 7 is technically part of the classic series, right? And as is Mega Man 8, although Mega Man 8 really makes me shudder sometimes. But there are some objectively good things that they tried to do in Mega Man 7. For example, you could use weapons in a way that wasn't just break a block or platform up, but to move things. And not just move things, but like to activate whole sections of a level. Maybe you've got a weapon that energizes something, and so now suddenly the conveyor belts are moving, the magnets are working, and you can now get access to areas that were otherwise completely inaccessible. And not just in a, oh, it moves me, but it moves the level. That was a very big difference. Or, for example, why don't we just burn down a forest? That was an option. Also, in Mega Man 7, the music was great. Really, really great. And at the end of the day, in that one, in Mega Man 7, they took a lot of risks, most of which paid off. And until Mega Man 11 showed up, I would have said that Mega Man 7 was the best of the post-NES games.
Okay.
Because while 9 is fine and 10 is fine, 8's terrible, 7 was definitely the best. And to be clear, most years I play through all the games, 1 through 11, all the classic series, in a go because I love the series so much. So
Where would you rank Mighty Number 9?
Mighty Number 9 does not make the list.
I'm just kidding. I will say, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that was when we went to GameStop Expo in Vegas. I'm 99% sure that you were playing Mighty Number 9, and you looked like you were having a good time. But I know that once games actually release, things change.
Yeah. You know what? I have no comment at this time on my state of mind there. I might have been just so starved for more Mega Man that I was excited about it. But all that is to say, Mega Man 7, fantastic. And while it isn't perfect, it's a very good game. And they tried new things. Some of them paid off. But perhaps the biggest thing that happened in 1966, that's right, 1966, we have Ralph Baer starting the video game industry. A little bit of a question mark here. According to his somewhat autobiographical book, Video Games in the Beginning, he talks about the beginning of September 1966 as him getting the ball rolling on home game consoles. He had at the time been working in ways to do interactive things with televisions because the company he was working with was doing military contracts, and it sure would be cool if they could have interactive things going on with television sets. Now, to be fair, Ralph Baer in that book is a bit maybe full of himself, I would say, when he talks about how much credit he deserves in the creation of video games. And I usually give a sidelong glance when people talk about how important in history they are, as I think we all should. Nonetheless, he does include scans of a 4-page document and a typed version, and it certainly looks legit. And even if it comes a little bit later down the line, it's a very coherent and well thought out description of what could be the future of video games as we remember it. Descriptions about how one would take something and interact with it on a television screen, how it could be used to do certain types of games. If it is, in fact, the genuine article, which it could very well be, it seems, when you read over it, somewhat almost prophetic with respect to what video games would eventually become. So all that is to say, I wasn't there, but it is potentially beginning of September 1966, potentially the beginning of video games as we know it. So, there's just some history for you.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, you know what else I love, Mac? I love this next segment called the Indie Game of the Week, where we talk about a game that may need more attention and tell you whether or not it deserves your attention. Mac, this week we're talking about a game called Dust and Neon. Now, to give some background before we dive in, as always, this game was provided, the codes, I should say, were provided for us for review, but that will not affect our opinions. Thank you, though, to the developers for providing these codes. Here's the description on Steam. Rain down hell on the robot army in Dust and Neon, an award-winning best-in-class post-apocalyptic shooter where twitchy finger gunslingers are rewarded with fame and glory. This game released in February 16th of 2023. Developer is David Marquardt Studios. Publisher is Rogue Games Incorporated. Currently sitting at 130 reviews on Steam with mixed reviews. And Mac, just to give some background, I requested this one a while ago from the developers. And shout out to them because they got it to us just maybe a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously check their emails and they're super busy, but they did make a time to get the point of getting back to us. So Mac, $19.99 is what this costs. What are your thoughts on the game?
Dust and Neon is a twin-stick shooter. And I am on the record as not usually being a big fan of twin-stick shooters.
Right.
I believe some people booed and hissed at me in episode 276 about my comments with respect to Smash TV. It is a little bit more. Enjoyable, I would say, than Smash TV. But at its heart, still twin-stick shooter. One thing that I particularly enjoyed about Dust and Neon is that as you are going through these various levels and you are destroying the robots and doing your thing, it is particularly well suited for short play sessions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can take out a mission in a couple of minutes, 10 to 15, and then you can go for another one. If that's all the time you have, 10 to 15 minutes, then bam, knock one out, keeps you entertained for a little bit, and then pick it up later. Particularly useful on the Steam Deck when we've got those sorts of options.
Agree.
I have some other things to say, but Mr. Nice Guy, anything particularly that you enjoyed about this one?
So here's what I'll say about this game. It is a well-made game. It controls well.
Mm-hmm.
They put some thought into mechanics, right? It's a twin-stick shooter, but because of the way this is made with kind of a Western robot theme, you can do things like take cover. The areas are somewhat detailed. You're walking through an area, you walk into a house, and it just opens up. Like the roof kind of disappears, and now you're inside the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
A decent number of power-ups, a decent number of upgrades, so that it doesn't get stale in that regard. You can buy guns. There's some things that kind of give you random upgrades. And then it has like a roguelike element where you can upgrade your damage, you can decrease the spread of your shots, and those are permanent upgrades. So they put some time into it. For me, the positive is, like you said, it's pick up and play. Pick it up, play for 15 minutes, put it down. The catch is, like, it didn't really hook me. There wasn't really anything that made me want to keep coming back. And so that's what I thought. What are your thoughts, though? What else did you want to say?
So I actually felt differently. I felt like it hooked me pretty hard and kept my attention for a long time. But I really struggled as I was getting into maybe what might be the end game as to keep focusing on it. Particularly some of the bosses, because there are bosses in it, will have like a gimmick or two. And the last boss that I made it to happens to have a gimmick where you are basically the whole time separated from where the boss is. You can't get close, and they are particularly good at their long range. And that really was a struggle for me. I still haven't taken that boss down. I don't know if it's the final boss, but it seems like it could be. So I don't necessarily shirk from a tough fight, is what I'm saying. But I haven't felt compelled to push forward on that final one. But there are some of the guns, some of the tactics approaches that I found particularly useful. As a PSA to anybody who's considering picking this one up because you think it's cool, focus on some of the healing aspects, because it's very much a war of attrition when you're fighting. Very much, I was thrilled once I unlocked the ability to make it so that every enemy I knocked down gave me some health back, which was key in my continued survival. And also sort of like, when it's time to reload your gun, you pop it open and you press X multiple times to reload the chambers, which added to the frantic nature of it, and the excitement, which I enjoyed and played well with me, frankly, even though I could probably see how it might get frustrating. And I think there's an option in the options for you to turn like automatic reloading on or some such like that. Didn't play with it because I just wanted to do it, bog standard. But yeah. So overall, I thought it did a great job at grabbing and keeping my attention, but I've struggled in the late game to want to keep going and complete it.
And I think for me, part of the challenge is that, in my opinion, like, we have played what are basically some masterpieces this year in terms of indie games. We've played some really, really good indie games, right? And so here's the tough question I'm going to ask you, Mac. What do you think about the price point for this game being $19.99? And I want to say, before you answer, we played Lunark this year, $19.99. We played Lone Fungus this year, $19.99. What do you think about this game and the price point?
So I would say fairly close. I think it's fairly close to what I think is right for a game like this. I think a little bit lower, 15, I think is probably more in keeping with what I expected from a game like this. But again, I could be old man yells at cloud. I will say it's close. They're definitely not asking far and above what I think is reasonable for a game of this quality.
Yeah, and I hate to compare it to other games because they're totally different genres, and every game is different. But where so many games are vying for our attention and so many companies want our gaming dollar, I just have to consider, comparing it to, those other games we played, which were great. Comparing it to Game Pass for a month being $15. To me, this is a little bit overpriced. I think that you get a good amount of replayability, but I just think it's a little bit overpriced. So, Mac, overall, would you recommend this game? You on the fence? Where are you at?
Well, I'm traditionally on the fence about twin stick shooters, but I think this game's central gimmicks make it more than just a twin stick shooter for me. I liked it. I'd go get it.
It's a good game, and we don't really do numerical ratings here on the show. I know that some gaming outlets get a lot of flack for giving games 7 out of 10. But keep in mind, 7 out of 10 is a good game. To me, this is in that range. If I was to give it like a numerical, like 6.5, 7 out of 10, it's a good game, and I can see why it has mixed reviews on Steam. Like, you'll have fun with this, but for me personally, it wasn't something that I really wanted to dive back into and grind. So that has been our indie game of the week. Thank you again for the codes. We wish you the best.
Well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart. I've got a link in the chat now for you guys to go ahead and take a look. This is called Twist Tales Forever After. Now, this is by a French company. This is their first Kickstarter, but it's not the first game that they've made. Previously, they have made a game. It's available on Steam, released, I think, beginning of 2022. It's mostly a racing game. This is definitely a slightly different style. What is it? It's an action fighting game with Cinderella as the main character, and it is incredible, and I love it, love it, love it. If you take a sort of Alice, what is the name? It's like Alice Return to Wonderland or whatever.
Alice Madness Returns.
That's it. Alice Madness Returns, and you mashed it together with a sort of Prince of Persia vibe. I think I'm doing justice to the vibes here at this here. Time or storyline wise, essentially what's happened is like fantasy worlds are real, like Hansel and Gretel, Cinderella, Grimm fairy tales worlds are real ish, and there's some form of corruption that's like seeping its way into those worlds, manifesting itself in Cinderella's happily ever after never really happening. And so, in this sort of interesting take, your fairy godmother has repurposed your shattered glass slipper into a sword, and so you are actively fighting off the corruption that's taking hold, not just in your own world, but in also the other worlds. They say Wonderland will be an option, also Hansel and Gretel, Red Riding Hood, and the like, with the various bosses and such. I like the look of it, and I like what they're doing, and yeah, I'll give you some more information. They're looking for just a skosh over $100,000 to bring this game to life. Planning on launching that around the neighborhood of where is it? Oh, sorry, the details have escaped me, but it's mid 2025. June 2025 is the expected release date. And the early bird versions of this are going for €20, which is $22. If you don't get it then it'll be $27, €25 for a copy of their game. Mr. Nice Guy, some thoughts about this?
I would love to look into this company and see what the other game is that they've made on Steam, and how it's done. That shouldn't affect the Kickstarter. It's almost not fair for me to look into that, because this looks really good in terms of the art style, in terms of the video. It looks like it flows smoothly. The Kickstarter is well put together. Once again, Mac, so many people are vying for our attention and vying for our gaming dollar. I think that $27, it's just too much. I'm not going to mince words here. You know, there's so much you can do with $27 on Steam. You know what I mean? You can get basically you could literally get three $9 games, and those would be quality games. So when we're asking people to put money down for a project that is 2 years out, we need to be cognizant of the fact that people are going to forget about your game. I'm still waiting for a game I put money down on in 2018 called Hazelnut Bastille, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get to play it. I know I bring this up a lot. That's my frustration with this, is the price point is just too much for what they're asking and when it's planning on being delivered.
I think that's very legitimate point. I think that that if you wanted to give it a look, their previous game was called Riding Seas, and it's available on Steam. They do throw in a copy of that previous game as well if you do back, so you get a Steam key for that game immediately. It's a racing game with boats. It's it looked fine. But you'd get that, and then of course you would get the game itself on release. And it is worth pointing out that there is a playable demo as a part of this. Something that you can download. You can get a feel for what is going to be released, or at least get a feel for what their vision is. Now, unfortunately, the demo is 8.5 gigabytes in size, and I can't spare that kind of bandwidth. I can barely handle this video call right here, right now, and I did not get on board with this the 2 days ago that it would have taken for me to get that downloaded and play it myself. But I do think the art looks good. I do think the gameplay looks good as well. And I am very optimistic, and I actually think, call me, a hopeless optimist, but I actually think that $22 to $27, I think I'm okay with that for an experience like this. But I know, this is a question of numbers for the two of us. Would you feel differently, Mr. Nice Guy, if you had seen this at, say, $15?
I really would. I feel like that's the sweet spot for indies right now, in terms of, I work, is this game going to be worth my money and worth my time? And for me, at $15, this one would be. At $27, I don't think it is. Now, you're saying 22. Keep in mind, that's the early bird. right?
Yes.
So once those run out, people are paying 20 cents.
Yep. Absolutely. And at the current moment, only about 50 or so left of those early birds. So, yeah.
I gotta say, just to be positive, like, this is a cool premise.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a completely unique premise. There was a TV show, I can't remember the name of it, where it had like these fantasy characters.
Once Upon a Time?
Once upon a time. Yeah. So I mean, this isn't a completely new premise, but it's a cool premise, and we've never seen it in a video game as far as I know.
No matter what, we wish everybody the best. I will say that I'm a bit concerned with 23 days left to go. Twist Tales has not made a very big dent in their overall goal. They are a far cry from being complete. I hope that this can go the distance because I would love to see this. I think I agree with you, Mr. Nice Guy. It's an interesting and a good idea, and I'd love to see it made. But either way, we wish you guys the best. What was it? It was Cat on Tree Studio. You've got a great idea here, and we'd love to see it.
Yep. Shout out to them for knowing how much it costs to make a game. Like, they're requesting enough that they could get 2 years out, I think. So, well, cool. Next up, Mac, it's time for Nerd Flex.
A woohoo.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the hosts. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. If you're here live, feel free to get a multiple choice question in the chat. Has to be gaming related. Has to be multiple choice. Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to try to answer the question. And Mac, we already have one from our good friend and listener, Ishmobile. Here is his question. What is coyote time? A, the average length for which a canine howls in 7 days to die. B, the amount of time you can jump after walking off something. C, the amount of time you have until your streak disappears. D, the length of time you must touch a hitbox to collect an item.
So, in general, I am familiar with coyote time as being the amount of time you can jump after walking off of something. So far as I am aware, I don't know if this is common, but I know that I have heard it used in reference to video game development. And so that is what I am. Like, for example, in Chasm, which I love, you've got a little bit of, several frames after you go off of a platform that you can still jump, and it'll be like, oh, we've still got whatever. And it's supposed to be a reference to, how Wile E. Coyote would hang in the air for a little bit before he'd fall.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think this is less of a video game specific question and more of a video game development type of thing.
Yeah, and so I mean that honestly kind of led me to believe it might be D, the length of time you must touch a hitbox to collect an item. What are your thoughts though? Is that the one you were leaning towards?
No, I was definitely leaning toward B for the jump time off of walking off something, and I feel pretty confident.
Well, I will go with your confidence. And we will go with B, final answer.
All right, and the answer is indeed B. It is named Coyote Time after the character from Looney Tunes, Wile E. Coyote, and all the times he finds himself floating in the air after walking off of a cliff. So, yeah, solid. Matter of fact, I've got to admit, I really appreciate a question not just about video games, but about the about the game development thing in general. So, like, if folk want to start asking questions about, like, greater game concepts, I mean, I'd be down for that, too. It's definitely video game related.
Agree, 100%. And we learned something new today. Had Looney Tunes in there as well. Hey, here is question number 2, Mac. We're going to hit up the test bank. And I'm excited to talk about this question. It's a Nintendo question. Over what 2 years were Nintendo's celebratory Year of Luigi? Over what 2 years were Nintendo's celebratory Year of Luigi? We'll have to work our way through this because I do not know.
Yeah. I feel like Year of Luigi wasn't that long ago, like 2017 and 2018 or something like that. I feel like it was recent.
And that makes sense because here's the thing. I remember I used to have this Mario shirt that said down since 85 on it. And I believe that was that the year Mario 1 came out, was 1985?
That tracks, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we think about like 30-year anniversary of Mario, because I know they did some 30-year anniversary stuff. That would have been 2015. So it makes sense that the years of Luigi would have probably been after that, but not on a year ending in 5, right? Because Mario kind of got the attention starting in 85. So 17 to 18 makes sense. I'm inclined to go with you on it.
It's a shot in the dark, but yeah, let's do it.
Let's see what the answer is. Okay, we were off. The logic was there.
Okay.
But it was actually 2013 and 2014. So right before they would have celebrated the 30 year of Mario.
It's still very much a recent development in the context of Mario as a whole.
Would you do the honors on the last question?
Certainly. The question is, in Grounded, which of the following is not an elemental damage type that can be applied to weapons? A, salty, B, sour, C, sweet, D, spicy. These all seem equally reasonable to me, and I've never played Grounded. Mr. Nice Guy, any thoughts?
I played it when it was in like its test period or early release. And are you familiar with the game at all, Mac? It's a game where it's almost like if Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was a video game.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think like which of these would not be bad for bugs. Because you're basically attacking bugs, right? Salty, sour, sweet, or spicy. And I don't know if that type of logic is going to work.
I think that of them, perhaps sweet is the only thing that doesn't seem like it would be a problem for bugs.
They would like sweet stuff, and I had the same thought. So why don't we do that? Let's go with sweet. Final answer.
Yes,
Let's
indeed.
go.
See, sweet is the odd one out here. No diabetic enemies to be found.
Fantastic.
Well, all in all, 2 out of 3, not too shabby on the
Not
Nerdflex
too
this
shabby.
time around.
That is it for Nerdflex. Thanks, y'all.
All right, well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legally.
I am not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast, and I've got something not quite video game related. It's California's Right to Repair Act, aka California Senate Bill 244. This is probably better called the Third Party Repairs Act. It's specifically for electronics and appliances, fridges, washers, TVs, computers. The requirement is that you, and by you I mean Apple, I mean GE, I mean Maytag, you must make parts, tools, and documentation to repair your equipment available to individuals and independent repair shops, the same as you would to authorized repair shops. Also, unless you are charging for a printed book with your info inside, and even then only at cost, the documentation will be given for free. Quote, electronic or appliance product manual, diagram, reporting output, service code description, schematic, or similar information, end quote. These are all considered to be covered by this. So let me put, though, there are some stipulations, some things that are worth noting. For example, if your electronic device costs under $50 for a consumer to purchase, then you aren't covered by this. You know, this doesn't impact you. I'm pretty sure. Between $50 and $99 and over $100, your requirements become a little bit different. For example, Mr. Nice Guy, you buy a television costs $99. All those things, parts, tools, documentations, are required to be available to you and to non-authorized repair shops for 3 years after you, the company, manufacture your last one. After that last one comes off the assembly line, 3 years, they've got to provide parts, tools, documentation for a repair of the equipment. If it costs more, $100 or more, 7 years after the manufacturing ends, they have to continue to provide that.
Wow.
Independent of any express or implied warranty period. Also, instead of this being an issue that can only be enforced by a state attorney general, which is how you would have to do with this, this change allows for malfeasance with respect to this. Like, if a company doesn't follow this, it allows smaller governments, city, county, or state, to sue in court for a company having not provided this information, as opposed to an already overworked state attorney general having to go and enforce this. Instead, a small government can make a suit. Now, there is still a financial inquiry bit that needs to be happened before this is officially signed into law, but that's the last hoop that it has to jump through. So the good, big top line things here, the good news here is, heck yes, we can get our hands on spec sheets for free and spare parts at the same prices and for longer amounts of time. The bad news is that this only applies if you already supply these things to authorized retailers, and it specifically carves out video game consoles.
What?
And only applies to stuff sold after July 2021. So not everything is going to be covered, and our video game consoles won't be.
Quick question. We don't have too much time to dive into this. Valve Steam Deck. Now it's at retailers. Like, there's refurbished ones you can pick up at GameStop. But because it was kind of a direct-to-consumer product, would it not cover the Steam Deck?
As I understand the wording, it was being sold before July 2021. So I think they would probably not be under those requirements.
Got it. Okay, good to know.
But yeah, I will throw out here that one of the real surprising things about this is that Apple actually decided to get on board with this, which is wild to me, because if you've at all followed Apple's stances on the right to repair, like, you know, back in the early 2010s, when various states were starting to consider right to repair laws, this would have been in conversation probably back around episode 75-ish. Apple fought like tooth and nail against them. And we've got like paper trails for the influence they exerted in New York because of the filings that they had to do with respect to lobbying. And in Nebraska, at least one state senator talked openly about the time that Apple sent people to her home to knock on her door and talk her out of supporting right to repair laws that they were contemplating in Nebraska. So, like, I'm just like, what kind of weird, wild world are we into that Apple's on board? But you know what? I'll take wins wherever we can get them. So, I mean, what I'm saying is, mad day, Mr. Nice Guy, we did not coordinate our conversation that we started by talking about Apple and the new iPhone and, you know, AAA games, and we're bookending it with Apple making the right choice and being on board with right to repair. It's wild insanity.
Apple, you're wearing him down. You're wearing him down. iPhone 15 is right around the corner. He's going to join us. One of us. One of us. One of us.
Lovely. Well, Mr. Nice Guy, that is our show, and a wild and crazy one it is, but you know us, guys. We got to talk about what we've been watching and what we've been playing. Give us the cool, nerdy things. Mr. Nice Guy, what have you been into?
Dude, I've been into a few things. So I mentioned the Xbox streaming, and the reason I was using that is because I've been playing Starfield, which is likely a Game of the Year candidate. I love Bethesda. If you know me, I'm a huge Fallout fan, and I'm enjoying Starfield. It's a great game. It takes some time to get into, but I'm excited to see what all there is to uncover and just journey across the planets and have a good time. So I've been enjoying that. And then also, ironically, another one of the biggest games of the year, Tears of the Kingdom. And then, the third game I've been playing is one that we are going to probably talk about next week. That is a retro game that we were given for review that I have been, I won't spoil it, that I've been playing. Let's leave it at that. And as far as watching, just a ton of YouTube, Mac. I've really gotten into these videos, as I've said before, of the Steam Deck being modified. And I just want my Steam Deck to look more unique. Right now, it's completely black. It's stock. I have this case on it from JSOX. Shout out to JSOX. They've supported us in the past and do. But I paid for this, just so we're clear, everybody. I paid for this case. But I want my Steam Deck to be a little more unique, so I've been watching those videos. Mac, I just blabbered for a while. What have you been into?
Let's see. We finished season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And I will say this, if you are planning on watching Strange New Worlds, you owe it to yourself to also watch Lower Decks, and to watch them at roughly the same general time frame. Let's see. I've also been watching Mentopolis. It's the new Dimension 20 thing going on. It's got Hank Green, quite good. And a podcast I've been listening to is Batman the Audio Adventures, with Rosario Dawson as our Catwoman. And she is crushing it. Bobby Moynihan as Penguin. You've got Alan Tudyk as Alfred. There's some good, solid voice acting in there. I've been playing Dust and Neon, and also the same game that Mr. Nice Guy declined to name, which we shall hear about soon enough. But that's about it for me.
I would just like to give a PSA. Try new genres of games. You may discover your next favorite game. Mac, why don't you take us home, sir?
Certainly. Thanks, everybody, for coming out and being a part of the show and making episode 281 what it was. We appreciate you being here, from your trivia, your conversation here live on twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod with the number 2, of course. Y'all are the best listeners on insert podcast platform here. You are the best viewers on Twitch, and you're just plain awesome. But remember, not everybody knows, so be excellent to each other. Share with them the show, and keep it nerdy. See ya.
Deuces.